There is a woman sitting in the back of a black SUV. It is 11:47 p.m. Her dress is white. Or it was. There's blood across the front of it. Not a smear, not a splash. The kind of blood that gets on you when something goes wrong fast in a small space. Her hands are in her lap, completely still. In those hands is a manila folder, stamped in red, classified, Mafia assets. She is on her way to hand it to a federal agent. 24 hours ago, she was the most protected woman in the city, the wife of the most powerful man in it, untouchable by anyone who knew what was good for them. Now she's the one pulling the pin. Her name is Valentina. And here is the only thing you need to know about her right now. She did not end up in the back of that car because she was brave. She ended up there because two people, the man she married and the sister she grew up with, made a calculation. They decided she was someone who could be used and discarded. They were wrong. What's inside that folder did not take Valentina one night to assemble. It took 8 years. 8 years of standing in the right rooms, keeping her mouth shut, and paying attention to everything that powerful men assume the women beside them are too loyal or too afraid to remember. Stay with me, because what she hands over in the next 20 minutes will destroy 4 lives, one of them almost being hers. The cruise operation doesn't exist anywhere you can find it, not in newspapers, not in court records, those get sealed. What it looks like from the outside is a shipping company, a hotel group, a construction firm, a private security outfit. Clean faces on dark infrastructure. The kind of arrangement that survives for decades because the man running it understands something most criminals never figure out. Violence is loud. Information is quiet. And quiet is how you last. Marcos Cruz built his empire on knowing things. Which judges owed money to the wrong people. Which city officials had histories they couldn't afford to have surfaced. Which rival organizations had weaknesses they didn't know anyone had noticed. By 41, he had made himself functionally immune, not through force alone, but through the accumulated leverage of 15 years of careful, patient intelligence gathering. He was not a man who raised his voice. He had never needed to. He married Valentina when she was 24. She was not what his associates expected. Not a trophy, not a socialite. She had grown up in a working-class neighborhood, the kind where you learn early to read a room, to notice what the person across the table is not saying, to understand that what someone shows you and what they want are almost never the same thing. Marcos thought he was choosing someone loyal, manageable, someone who understood the rules of the life she was marrying into. He was right about everything except the manageable part. For 8 years, Valentina ran the household. She ran the charitable foundation, the cruise group's public face, the thing that kept the family name clean. And she ran the accounts, all of them, including the ones that didn't officially exist. Marcos handed her the financial architecture of his operation because she had proven, year after year, that she was unshakably steady. What he mistook for compliance was actually something else entirely. A woman who had learned that the most powerful thing you can do in a room full of powerful men is make them believe you're not paying attention. She was always paying attention. Now meet Serena, Valentina's younger sister. 3 years between them. Blonde where Valentina is dark, loud where Valentina is still. Always slightly outside the life she watched her sister build. The penthouse, the cars, the clothes, the name. Serena had been at every family dinner for 8 years. She had sat across the table from Marcos Cruz. She had watched how a man like that moved through the world, and she had made a decision. What that decision actually was, Valentina won't find out until she's sitting in a federal conference room at 10:30 at night. And when she does, it will reframe every single thing that came before it. But we'll get there. 3 months before the night with the bloody dress, Valentina found something in one of the offshore accounts she managed. A recurring transfer. Small enough that it wouldn't flag an automated audit. But she tracked it, the way she tracked everything. And it led to a name she didn't recognize under a corporate structure that shouldn't have existed. She wrote it down, said nothing, kept watching. She had been married to Marcos Cruz for 8 years. She knew the difference between a mistake and a decision. Whatever this was, someone had made it deliberately and gone to significant trouble to keep it quiet. She filed the information away, went to dinner, smiled across the table at her husband, and started paying a different kind of attention. 3 weeks before, the transfers were multiplying, small, consistent, routed through a shell account she hadn't set up and couldn't trace to any operational budget she managed. Someone was bleeding the ledger, carefully, deliberately, and had been doing it long enough that the total had climbed past 6 figures without triggering anything. Valentina started keeping a second set of records, handwritten, locked in a box in the back of her personal closet. Every night, the date, the amount, the destination, the account code. She asked no questions. She made no accusations. She had learned 8 years ago that the most dangerous thing you can do in this life is ask the wrong question before you know the full answer. 2 weeks before, she found the hotel charges on a Tuesday afternoon while reconciling the operational expense accounts. The Aragon, a cruise, group property on the east side, had a suite on the 7th floor that had been booked 47 times in 3 months. Same day of the week, charged to a miscellaneous hospitality account. Valentina pulled the keycard access logs. 2 cards. One registered to Marcos. One registered to a guest account under a name she recognized immediately. Her sister's middle name. She sat with that for exactly 60 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and booked a facial at the hotel spa for the following Tuesday. She arrived on time, signed in at the front desk, sat down in the waiting area in her coat with her sunglasses on. At 2:23 p.m., she walked to the elevator and rode it to the 7th floor. She stood at the end of the hallway. Room 714's door opened. Marcos first, his back to her, straightening his jacket. Then Serena, stepping out behind him, laughing at something he'd said, her hand moving to his arm, his hand going to the small of her back, before the door even closed fully behind them. They turned and walked the other direction down the hall. They didn't see her. The whole thing lasted 12 seconds. Valentina rode the elevator down, walked through the lobby, got into her car in the parking garage. She sat there with both hands on the wheel and the engine off. Here's what she did not do. She did not scream. She did not call anyone. She did not cry, though the pressure behind her eyes was enormous and physical, like something trying to get out. What she felt in that garage, if you have ever had a truth finally confirm something you already knew and hoped you were wrong about, was not surprise. It was the specific, awful relief of a fear becoming a fact. Because fear can be argued with, facts cannot. She started the engine, drove home. That night, Marcos arrived for dinner at 7 p.m. exactly. He kissed her cheek. He poured wine, hers first, the way he always did. He talked about a property development in Miami and asked whether she'd given any thought to where they should go for their anniversary. Valentina held her wine glass. She answered his question about Miami. She offered an opinion on the anniversary. She ate every course. Under the table, her free hand was pressed flat against her thigh, not shaking but pressing down, holding herself to the chair, to the room, to the performance of being exactly who she had been at this table for 8 years. Stay with me, because what happens next is not a confrontation. It is not a breakdown. It is not what any person sitting at that table would have predicted. It is something that Marcos Cruz, who built his life on understanding pressure points, on knowing what people will do when they are cornered, never saw coming, because he had never, in 8 years, considered the possibility that his wife was more patient than he was. 4 days later, Valentina was called to one of the family's South Side warehouses, a logistics issue with incoming shipment records. She arrived to find the building empty except for 2 of Marcus's men. They were not there to discuss logistics. Someone had found her handwritten ledger. One of the men explained, with the specific, rehearsed politeness of someone delivering a message they didn't write, that Mr. Cruz would like to speak with her about a documentation irregularity, that she should come with them. The other one put his hand on her arm. The next 4 minutes moved very fast in a very small space. Valentina had grown up in a neighborhood where a fire extinguisher mounted to a wall is both a safety device and, in a crisis, whatever you need it to be. She walked out of that warehouse with a torn sleeve, a cut above her eyebrow, blood on the front of her white dress, and both men zip-tied to a structural beam. She got into her car. She drove home. She packed one bag, moving through the apartment with the focused efficiency of someone who has already decided everything. And then she opened her laptop and pulled up the number she had researched 3 weeks ago and told herself she hoped she would never need. She picked up her phone. The FBI field office on Delancey Street has a security desk, fluorescent lighting, and a guard who looks like he has been sitting in that chair since the building was constructed. Valentina walked in at 7:14 p.m., blood still on her dress, bag over one shoulder. The guard told her to state her business. She said, "I need whoever is running the Cruz investigation. Tell them I have the financial architecture of the entire operation going back 6 years. Account numbers, shell company structures, 2 elected officials on the payroll, recorded proof of 3 separate money laundering channels. Tell them I have all of it, and tell them I'm only going to say this once." She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, looked straight ahead. 11 minutes passed. Then a door opened. Agent Daniel Reyes was not what she expected. Mid-30s, dark suit, no tie. He moved through the room with the specific stillness of someone who has trained themselves to give nothing away, not from coldness, but from discipline. Like a man who learned early that showing what you're thinking is a form of surrender. He looked at her dress, then her face. He sat down across from her and did not offer his hand. "Mrs. Cruz," he said. "Miss Vega," she said, her maiden name. She had not used it in 8 years. Something shifted in his eyes, almost imperceptible. He uncapped his pen. "Walk me through what you have," he said. She walked him through it for 3 hours. The offshore account structure, each layer, each institution, each country. The shell companies that were actively laundering versus the ones that were legitimate cover. the routing method for the two politicians' payments, the Port Authority contact who flagged certain shipments for unimpeded clearance, the full financial map of an empire that the FBI had been trying to prosecute for 4 years and kept failing because they had never had a source with Valentina's level of access and Valentina's level of documentation. Reyes asked precise, careful questions that told her he was not starting from zero. He had fragments of this picture. What she was giving him was what made those fragments stick together in a courtroom. At 10:30 p.m., he set his pen down. The table between them was covered in her handwritten records, her printed account histories, a timeline she had constructed from memory and bank logs over 3 weeks of quiet, careful, invisible work. He looked at her. "Why now?" he asked. Valentina said nothing for a moment. She looked down at the torn fabric of her sleeve, the place where someone had grabbed her arm that afternoon, and then back up. "Because tonight they put their hands on me." Reyes held the stillness of that answer for a beat. "And before tonight?" "Before tonight," she said, "I was still deciding what I was willing to lose. Hold on. Because what Reyes does next is not what this story appears to be about, and it is going to rewrite everything you think you just heard." He slid a photograph across the table. Surveillance image. Grainy, taken from distance. Valentina and Serena at a restaurant. Dated 14 months ago. "Your sister," he said. He didn't phrase it as a question. "We've had her flagged as a person of interest for 8 months. He paused. "Not because of the affair." Valentina went very still. "Your sister has been working for the Vega Syndicate out of Phoenix for at least 2 years. She made contact with Marcus's operation specifically because of her proximity to you. She's been feeding them his shipment schedules, his financial exposure, the structural weaknesses in his organization." Reyes kept his voice level and careful, the way you do when you're delivering something that might break a person. "She didn't fall for your husband, Miss Vega. She was assigned to him. Your relationship with Marcos was her access point. You were the door. The room was quiet." Valentina looked at the photograph. Her sister's face, laughing at something Valentina must have said, because Valentina was the one next to her at that table, 14 months ago, at a lunch she could still probably remember. "Does she know you know?" She said finally, "No." "How long has this been documented?" 8 months of confirmed activity. "Possibly longer." Valentina looked up from the photograph. "Then she doesn't know her cover is blown. She still thinks she's running the operation." Reyes waited. "I want to be in the room when you tell her," Valentina said. "I want to sit across from her. She'll perform. She'll give you something because that's what she does. She calculates, and she performs. But if I'm there, she'll overplay it. She'll try to manage me, and she'll give you more than she intends to." Reyes looked at her for a long moment. "That's not a standard ask," he said. "No," Valentina agreed. "But you've been working this case for 4 years. I walked in here 3 hours ago and gave you more usable material than you've accumulated in 4 years. She held his gaze. "I think I've earned the ask. This is the moment, right here. Watch what it costs her." Because agreeing to that room means sitting across from her sister, not to confront her, not to grieve, not to get an explanation, but to be used as an instrument, to weaponize the relationship, to let Reyes use the bond between them as a tool the same way Serena used it first. Valentina knows this. She is choosing it anyway. That choice is the real transformation in this story, not the revenge plot, not the folder, not the arrests. The moment she decides to meet her sister's calculation with her own, the operation ran 72 hours. Valentina worked with federal forensic accountants. She slept 4 hours in a safe house. She ate food that was brought to her. She did not ask to call anyone. She did not check for messages from Marcos, who by now she knew had discovered she was gone and would be managing his own crisis. On the first night, alone in the safe house bathroom, she took off her wedding ring. She held it for a moment. 8 years of wait. Then she set it on the edge of the sink, not thrown, not flushed, set down carefully, the way you put down something that was once important, and walked out. She did not look back at it. On the third day, Serena walked into the federal building believing she was attending a witness protection preliminary screening related to the Cruz investigation. She had been told she was a potential protected witness. She walked into the conference room. Valentina was sitting at the table. The silence between them lasted 8 full seconds. Valentina counted. Serena's face moved through 3 expressions in those 8 seconds: shock, recalculation, and then a performance of grief that was almost convincing. "Val, sit down," Valentina said. Not cold, not angry, quiet. The voice of someone who has already decided how this ends. Serena sat. Serena talked for 6 hours. She gave them the Phoenix operations contact structure, the financial relay system, the identity of the handler she'd reported to for 2 years. She gave them more than Reyes had hoped for, and more than she probably intended, because Valentina sat at that table for 6 hours, and every time Serena looked at her, looking for something, looking for the sister she'd calculated she could still manage, she found nothing readable. Just stillness, just patience. It undid Serena more than anything else could have. The grief Valentina felt watching this was not what she had expected. She had expected something sharp, fury maybe, or a dark satisfaction. What she felt instead was quieter and stranger, a kind of grief for the relationship she'd thought she had, for the version of her sister she'd believed in, for all the years of dinners and phone calls and shared history that had been real for one of them and a performance for the other. You can make peace with a sister who chose the wrong thing. You cannot make peace with a sister who looked at you and saw a resource. Valentina made peace with that distinction in that conference room. She filed it somewhere where it wouldn't keep hurting her, and then she stayed until it was done. The arrests happened on a Thursday morning. Marcos Cruz was taken from the penthouse at 6:15 a.m. 14 members of the operation were picked up simultaneously across 4 cities. The Port Authority contact, the 2 politicians, the financial officers who had believed until that morning that insulation from direct action meant insulation from everything. Valentina was not there to see it. She had asked not to be. She was already somewhere else, sitting in the Cruz Group's main boardroom with a federal trustee and 2 attorneys, walking through the separation of the charitable foundation from the criminal enterprise. 8 years of her work, legitimate, real, built by her hands, and now finally fully hers. The trustee asked if she intended to continue running it under the new structure. Yes, she said. No hesitation. But here is the thing about transformation. It is not a single moment. It is not the wedding ring on the bathroom sink or the folder handed to Reyes or the look on Serena's face in that conference room. It is a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks later, when Valentina walks into the Foundation's offices, her offices, and sits down at her desk and opens her calendar and starts working, not surviving. not executing a plan, working, building something. Reyes calls her that afternoon. Not about the case. The case is closed. Something else. His voice is careful in the way it is when someone has thought about how they're going to say something for longer than they expected. She listens. She does not answer immediately. She looks out the window at the city, the same city, different position, and she thinks about what she is and is not willing to lose now. "Give me 24 hours, she says. She hangs up. The question is open. Here's what nobody knows yet. Buried in the financial records Valentina handed over deep in a 6-year-old transfer log, one line among thousands, is a name that has nothing to do with Marcus's operation. Reyes found it 2 weeks after the arrests. He sat on it for another week before he called her, because what that name implies is not just another thread in the Cruz case. It is a thread that leads back to Valentina's own family. Not Serena, someone else. Someone who has been in her life longer than Marcos, longer than Serena's operation, longer than any of this. When he tells her what he found, she goes completely silent for 11 seconds. That is the next chapter, and it starts somewhere none of us expected. If this story hit you, if you felt the weight of that conference room, if you held your breath when Serena sat down, if the wedding ring on the sink got you, then you know what to do. Follow this channel. Part 2 is coming, and it opens in a place that reframes everything. One question before you go. Did Valentina win, or did she just survive? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one,